Okay, class. Today we're going to talk about some other ways of living besides renting an apartment or purchasing a home, and that is condominiums, townhomes, and cooperatives. So in this lesson, you're going to learn to also compute the cost of purchasing a cooperative or a condominium, and also be able to explain the advantages and disadvantages of purchasing different types of homes. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So some information. A condominium is a form of homeownership where each unit is individually owned. So as a condominium owner, you would be responsible for what's on the inside, but outside, for example, your property would be maintained by what's called a homeowners association or a board of directors that's responsible for maintaining the common grounds. Things like lawns, outside walls, decks, if you have any, roofs, sidewalks, the roads, if there are any pools or golf courses or tennis courts, those would be maintained by your homeowners association. Another type of condominiums are called townhouses, and these are individual buildings with no shared entrances or exits, but they could be attached to another townhouse or it could be a standalone. Okay. Now, another type is called what's called a cooperative or a co-op apartment, and this is another form of home ownership. So a cooperative is essentially a corporation that owns the apartment complex or a group of apartments. And what this happens, what basically takes place is that the corporation will take out a mortgage, sort of like a regular homeowner would, and they would buy the entire apartment complex. And then investors would then purchase shares in the co-op, and then as investors, these shares would allow you to occupy the apartment. Now, co-op owners do not own their individual apartment. So you are living in the apartment, but you don't own that particular apartment. You basically own a portion or a share of the entire cooperative development. What this also means is that you can sell your shares if the value goes up and make a profit from the sale of those shares. As a co-op owner, you have the responsibility of paying what's called a monthly maintenance fee, and that fee will cover the share of the maintenance of the apartment complex, and part of the maintenance fee will go towards paying the mortgage that the cooperative took out. Now, like condominiums, cooperatives usually have a board of directors, or in this case we would call HOA, Homeowners Association, and they will manage business matters just like condominiums. And then just like condominiums, co-op owners will also vote on any major issues that come up. Okay, now a third type of home ownership, which is not as common, but you may want to be aware that these exist, is what's called condominiums. And this is a hybrid housing type, which is often a townhome or a detached unit, where you as the owner own both the home and the land that the home is built, unlike a traditional condo where you only own the interior space. Okay, so that's sort of one of the differences. These properties or condominiums offer the maintenance-free benefits of an HOA. So they'll take care of things like your landscaping and snow removal if you have snow in your area, while allowing for more individual ownership or autonomy. Okay, so it's very similar to a condo or a townhome, but there are some minor differences here where condominiums basically give you more individuality and autonomy over what you own, but not quite as much as you would if you owned a single family home. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the math involved here. So in example one, We see that last year, Tyler paid a monthly cooperative maintenance fee of $912. 15% of this fee covered his monthly property tax, and the question is, how much did Tyler pay last year in property taxes in total for the year on his co-op? Okay, so the way we calculate this is fairly straightforward. We would take $912 and we multiply that by 15.15 or 15%, and we do this because we want to know what percentage of his monthly fee went to cover property taxes. Okay, so if we punch that in to the calculator, we'd find that 15% is $136.80. Okay, so then on an annual basis, we multiply that by 12, and the total that Tyler paid was $1,641.60. All right, let's move on to example 2. The Seaford Cove Cooperative is owned by the shareholders. The co-op has a total of 50,000 shares. Janet has an apartment at Seaford Cove and owns 550 shares of the cooperative. The question here is, what percentage of Seaford Cove does Janet own? All right, so we would take her 550 shares and we would divide that by the total number of shares. All right, and if you punch that into the calculator, you'd find that she owns 1.1% of the co-op. All right, moving on to example 3. Okay, so we're gonna apply in this example an exponential growth equation. And so we have Jake and Gloria moving into an apartment, and they pay a monthly rent of $1,900, and the landlord tells them that the rent will increase 4.1% per year on average. Okay, so we need to determine the amount of rent they will be paying in their 13th year. Okay, and so what we have is this equation where the yearly rent, is equal to A, which is our initial annual rent, times 1 plus B over 100, where B is the rate of increase, and it's raised to the D minus 1 power, where D is the year number. Okay, so in this example, we would be looking to solve for what the rent is in their 13th year. So it would be R equals the initial rent, which is $1,900, and we're going to multiply that by 1 plus 4.1%. That's the rate of increase over 100, raised to the 13 minus 1 power. Okay, now if you were to punch this into a calculator or the spreadsheet, you would find that their yearly rent, or the monthly rent in their 13th year, would be $3,077.20. Okay, so obviously renting an apartment long term is not necessarily the best financial decision, because as you will see, the rent does increase quite a bit over a period of 13 years. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to example 4. All right, so this is a scenario that some of you may encounter later on in the future. And so I wanted to kind of go over some of the reasoning behind this, and that is you will run into a situation similar to Gary in this example, where he is now being relocated to a new city, and he knows he's going to be situated there for at least 10 years, and has a choice of doing one of two things: renting a house for $2,500 a month, where the annual increase is going to be 2% per year, or buying a home by putting down $100,000 and taking out a mortgage of $350,000 for 20 years at an APR 3.5%. Okay, so the question is, should he rent or buy? Now, in this example, we're going to just look at the financial aspect of it. One thing that I will caution, and this is just my personal opinion, When you move to a new area and you don't know anything about the area, my recommendation is to rent for a short period of time, whether it be 6 months or 12 months or 18 months. And this will allow you to settle in and get to know the area so that you optimize or find a home that you can buy in the area that you really want to reside. Okay, if you go in to a new city and go straight into purchasing, you run the risk of making a purchase in an area that may not be the ideal place. And so it would be worth the investment to rent for a short period of time, educate yourself, become acquainted to the area. And the only way to do that is to physically be there and live on a day-by-day basis. All right, so let's take a look at how we would calculate this, okay? So what we're going to do is move over to the spreadsheet, and we're gonna look at first the renting aspect of things, and then we're gonna move to the home purchase aspect. Okay, so we know that the initial rent is going to be $2,500, and the yearly inflation rate is gonna be 2%, and so we wanna know how much rent Gary is gonna be paying every year, okay? So for year one, he's going to be paying this $2,500, so I'm gonna say equals that cell times 12, okay? And my running rent, this is another column that will kind of add the totals as the years go by, so I'm gonna just go ahead and say this is equal to the yearly rent. All right. Now, in this case, rent's going to increase by 2%, so we're gonna take the previous cell and we're gonna multiply that by 1.02 for 2%, okay? And then for this cell, this is going to be the sum of year two plus the sum of year one, all right? And now we can go ahead and copy this all the way down to year 10, okay? And you'll see that after the end of 10 years, Gary will have paid over $328,000 just in rent. And remember, when you're renting, you don't get any of that money back. So you're basically throwing that money away, okay? Now, let's take a look at the buying aspect. So we were told that he's going to borrow $350,000 at an interest rate of 3.5%, and the length of the loan will be 20 years, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at how we would calculate this. We've done this before, but for those of you who are new to this, this is how you determine what the payment is going to be each month, okay? So the beginning balance is going to equal this number, which is B3. My monthly mortgage is going to be the payment function of 3.5 divided by 12, but we have to divide it by 1,200 because it's not in decimal form. And then we're going to be borrowing this money for a total of 20 years, so that's 240 months. So we need to type that in. And then the loan amount is going to be the negative of that cell. We can go ahead and close that off. And one of the things I'm going to do is put a $sign in front of the 3 for B3 to lock that amount in. So this function will lock that cell so that when I copy it, it will always refer to that. And I'm also going to lock in B4. All right, now we have a mortgage of $2,029.86. Now to determine how much interest is paid towards that, we're going to take the principal amount, which is $350,000. Notice I'm using cell C9 this time, and that's because as for each subsequent month, that balance is going to go down, and so the amount of interest is also going to go down. So we're going to take that and we're going to multiply that by 3.5% or 0.035, okay? And I forgot to divide that by 12. So we take that, divide that by 12. So that's 1,020.83 cents towards interest. So what's left towards principal will be the mortgage amount, D3 minus D9 minus E9. Okay? And now my ending balance is going to be equal to the beginning balance, which is C9, minus the principal of 1,009. And now you'll see that my ending balance is now $348,990.97. That's for month 1. So then for month 2, my beginning balance is going to equal the ending balance of month 1. And then we're going to copy this mortgage amount. That doesn't change, but you'll see that my interest will start to drop and the principal will start to increase, and now my ending balance will start to drop. Okay, so now I can go ahead and copy all of this all the way down to 10 years, which will be 120 months. Okay, I forgot to drag this down. Let's try that again. So I'm going to drag this all the way down to 120 months. All right, we can go ahead and paste that, and there we go. All right, and then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to sum this entire column F, because we want to know how much principal or equity Gary is building. Okay, so we're going to sum from F9 all the way down to F128. So we're going to say sum F9 to F128. Okay, so what is the net result here? You'll see that Gary is building, or will have built, an equity of $144,727 over the course of 10 years, plus we need to add in the $100,000 down payment that he made. So he's going to have a total equity of over $244,000. Okay, that compared to the expense of renting, which was over $328,000 that he's never going to get back. Obviously, there are other factors to take into account, but based on the financials, it would be better for Gary to buy a home. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to example 5. In the early 2000s, the price of cooperative apartments soared until the economic recession of 2009. Okay. In 1995, Ruth and Gino bought a co-op for $98,000. They borrowed $75,000 from the bank to buy their co-op. As years passed, they wanted to sell their co-op, but unfortunately, the market value had dipped to $61,000. Okay, so they bought it for $90,000, it dipped to $61,000. Their equity was, over that period, $6,744. If they sold the co-op, they would have to pay off the mortgage. Okay, so how much would they have to pay back the bank if they were to sell their co-op? Okay, so we start with how much they borrowed from the bank, which was $75,000. Okay, and we're going to subtract out their equity, okay, over that period of time, and that works out to $68,256. Okay, so they owe the bank $68,256 so far. Okay, now if they were to sell the co-op, then they could sell it for $61,000. Then what's left is $7,256, which they would have to pay the bank in order to be cleared of paying everything off. Okay, so in this case, it would not be a wise idea for Ruth and Gino to sell, but if they had to, this is how much that they would owe. Okay, hopefully this made sense. If any of this was confusing or not clear, please go back to the beginning of the recording and listen to this again. Thank you.